Hello, good evening, welcome. Tonight on the David Ellis Report, we will be discussing transformation. The British military is being transformed, not cut. For as long as I can remember, all of the discussions have been about cuts. But the fact is, Britain is committed to spending 2% of GDP on defence. That is not going to change. Nothing is being cut, it is being transformed. The question is, what is it being transformed into? To answer that, we will begin in 2015, when the Strategic Defence and Security Review promised to deliver a full spectrum approach. Then Prime Minister David Cameron assured the nation of world-leading armed forces and protect the nuclear deterrent, equipment for special forces and resources for security and intelligence agencies. The 2015 SDSR was followed up in 2018 with the National Security Capability Review, which included the second annual report on implementation of the National Security Strategy and Strategic Defence and Security View in 2015. It introduced a new concept to the world, fusion doctrine. Theresa May was the Prime Minister, and she defined the fusion doctrine as focusing on 5 key areas. Focus on the Sahel region of Africa, building markets in emerging economies, enforcing the rules-based international order, addressing the root causes of conflict, and tackling cross-border threats. The first of these, focus on the Sahel, we had heard about before, but not from Theresa May.
First of all, our collective defence. We are ironclad committed to NATO. NATO of 29, that is collective defense Article 5. But there are problems and issues where I do not see NATO, but Europe has to be able to act.
Though this transatlantic alliance with America is extremely important and we need to maintain it, the best partnership is a partnership where we have our own capabilities that are also strong.
I was talking about Africa. This is not a typical place for NATO. We are very committed to NATO in other places, but Africa is a place where we need to be able to act as Europeans.
For example, one of the things that my institute does is work in Africa, and at the moment we're particularly focused on the Sahel group of countries. That's that band of countries across the north part of sub-Saharan Africa, where you've got exploding populations, dire poverty, radicalization and extremism. We may well face the next wave of migration and extremism from those countries. It makes perfect sense for Europe to have the military capability to help those countries with their security.
And for that, we created the European Defence Union,
right,
to have a comprehensive approach with diplomacy, economic development, and the military means.
As a rule, the major defence reviews are carried out every 5 years. Keeping to that schedule, Boris Johnson set out the government's approach to the 2020 Defence Review on the 26th of February. This newly integrated review would not only cover defence and security, but international development and foreign policy as well. It is to be the biggest review since the end of the Cold War. This is a defining moment in how the UK relates to the rest of the world. And we want to take this unique opportunity to reassess our priorities and our approach to delivering them. The integrated review will, Boris said, define the government's ambition for the UK's role in the world and the long-term strategic aims for our national security and foreign policy. Set out the way in which the UK will be a problem-solving and burden-sharing nation, examining how we work more effectively with our allies, determine the capabilities we need for the next decade and beyond to pursue our objectives and address these risks and the risks we face. Identify the reforms, government systems and structures to achieve those goals, outline a clear approach to the implementation over the next decade, and we will set out how we will evaluate the delivery of our aims. The review will be underpinned by the commitments the government has already made to continue to exceed the NATO target of spending of 2% of GDP on defence, to commit to 0.7% of GNI to international development, and to maintain the nuclear deterrent. A cross-Whitehall team in the Cabinet Secretariat and a small task force in Number 10 will report to me and the National Security Council. But while the media is full of stories about scrapping of tanks and the denials of scrapping of tanks, the integrated review is all about much more than that. Presenting it as just about cuts is not telling the whole story. I have no doubt that Britain's military will lose some or all of its tanks. There will be fewer soldiers once this process is completed. But as Boris has said, the 2% spending target is written in stone. That money will be spent. To get some idea of what policy they have in mind, let's remind ourselves of the comments Chief of the General Staff, Mark Carleton-Smith, made a couple of years ago.
Systematically exploiting instead that hybrid space that exists between those two increasingly redundant states of peace and war. Artificial and binary characterizations of a strategic context that no longer exists today, but which still drives much of our policy and legal definition and their associated frameworks.
In the minds of top military brass, we are in a perpetual hybrid war with Russia and China. At the end of September, Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir Nick Carter, gave a presentation at the Policy Exchange think tank to launch what he called the Integrated Operating Concept. Carter presented the IOC as a response to the rise of authoritarian regimes, meaning Russia and China. He echoes Carleton-Smith's position that we were in a perpetual war with those regimes, and that because those regimes are using hybrid tactics, Britain will have to change its defence focus.
So, what should be our response to this ever more complex and dynamic strategic context? My view is that more of the same will not be enough. We must fundamentally change our thinking if we are not to be overwhelmed. Hence, we are launching this integrated operating concept. We have to modernise. We must chart a direction of travel from an industrial age of platforms to an information age of systems. Warfare is increasingly about a competition between hiding and finding. It will be enabled at every level by a digital backbone into which all sensors, effectors, and deciders will be plugged. This means that some industrial age capabilities will increasingly have to meet their sunset to create the space for capabilities needed for sunrise. The trick is how you find a path through the night. We know this will require us to embrace combinations of information-centric technologies, but predicting these combinations will be challenging. We will have to take risk, accept some failure, and place emphasis on experimentation by allocating resources, force structure, training and exercise activity to stimulate innovation in all lines of development, with a responsive commercial function at the leading edge.
The 2020 Integrated Review of Security, Defence, Development, Foreign Policy then isn't about defence cuts, although they said some specific areas may need to be cut in order to make room for others. It is about the transformation of British military from an independent fighting force with a proud history of defending the nation into an interoperability glue which will work in partnership with the USA, the EU, commercial world, and to wage perpetual low-intensity hybrid war with an eye to global competition for the Sahel. But it does not end there. We have already seen the merging of Foreign Office and the Department of International Development, two parts of this integrated review. Adding to that the fusion doctrine, the paramilitarisation of the police and a host of other changes which redefine our relationship as individuals with the state. This is part of a remodelling of government, and it's time we all started to pay attention.